The cost of illegal migration in this country is absolutely staggering. I'll show you some figures in a minute that I've slammed together from the official statistics of just small boat crossings alone. This doesn't even include any other way of coming into the country, such as defrauding visas and so on. This is just those arriving on small boats, which are quite clearly have no permission to be in the UK. They may well claim asylum when they are here, and those may or may not be valid. That's my usual caveat, but running on the basis that they arrived here illegally in the first place. I will show you those numbers in a minute. But to be fair, Keir Starmer appears to be getting the picture that the vast majority of people, I think, do want something done about this because of the sheer cost to the country, which I'll show you in a minute. It's staggering. But the recent development is somewhat embarrassing because Keir Starmer was in Albania where he announced that he was in talks with several countries to try to build some sort of return hub for failed asylum seekers as against reigniting the Rwanda plan, both of which I'll talk about in this video. And it seems to be a little bit embarrassing because Albania has already said no, even though it's hosting those for Italy. And there's a little bit more about that in a minute as well. But first of all, please do subscribe to my channel here. I really appreciate you subscribing, liking the video, sharing the video. That helps far more than you know. If you've watched for any length of time and you do enjoy the content or the updates or whatever, even if you disagree, that's fine. We can agree to disagree. Please do subscribe. That really does help. I am independent and I depend on you. I have no big media company behind me. Thank you very much indeed for doing that. I really mean that. Let's take a look at some figures and then we'll talk about what's going on with Keir Starmer and this plan that he's got here. These figures here, you can see the bit in yellow and the bits to the right hand side of it are all mine, but the key figures are taken from this list, this sheet, which is small boat arrivals on this spreadsheet here. It's all publicly available information. Just to explain it just for a moment, the cash here is what they receive every week when they arrive. If their hotel or whatever provides food, this goes down to another level. So they may not provide food. Not all of the hotels provide food. So admittedly, the cash portion of this, at the very least, is based on them receiving the cash. If they don't receive the cash, then I would proffer that the difference is negligible because if the hotel's providing food, it's being paid for one way or another. And so whilst they might not get the cash in hand, they get the food in hand, so to speak. So that £49 is probably here or there accurate anyway. And then the hotel costs, that's based on the nightly fee. Obviously, these are one type of accommodation that goes down drastically if they're moved into dispersal accommodation. But many people are complaining about that because dispersal accommodation might mean going to a holiday camp, a military base somewhere, or somewhere else near you, or houses near you that you perhaps would prefer they not go to. And I stress this video is not to drive hate or anything else. It's just spelling out the facts that some people are unhappy with that because they pay for the houses themselves, etc. And some people have a philosophical problem with it. Nonetheless, I am here to spell out facts for you, and that you can make up your own minds. Of course, I strongly discourage anybody from posting hateful content or much, much less going out and actually saying and doing something that is hateful and disrespectful. So with that out of the way, let's take a look at some hard figures. January, February, March, April and May so far this year, and this may not even reflect the full figures because it may be undercounting some, is over 12,000 people have arrived in the UK illegally. Now, presumably, the vast majority of them are claiming asylum, and that will take some time, but that, again, I'll come back to a bit later with Keir Starmer's plans and so on. Now, the cash alone and the hotels alone work out to per week, just for those that have arrived this year alone, are £624,000 in cash, and almost £13 million for hotel bills, assuming they all go to hotels. Not all of them go to hotels. Some of them go to a dispersal accommodation, which, as I've mentioned, some people are even less happy about that than they are about the hotels. It's a cost versus where they live comparison sort of thing. Annualizing those figures, we have a staggering £32 million in cash and £670 million, it pains me to say it, in hotel bills. And if we look at April alone, just the month gone, we're looking at almost a £250,000 in cash and £4.5 million in hotels per week. Or for the April portion, £11 odd million a year for the cash and £233 million a year for hotels, assuming the vast majority go into a hotel, etc. And those are just those that have arrived this year, not the 1.2 million odd that we believe are in this country that we know about, because we don't actually have the full statistics. Because the very fact that they're arriving illegally, clearly they don't have or don't necessarily have absolutely accurate figures. So what's the proposed current plan, and what's the problem with the proposed current plan? Well, the current proposed plan is that we're looking for another country to send failed asylum seekers to. Albania has already said no. Now, many people might say, well, hang on a minute, didn't we have some kind of plan to send them somewhere? And yes, we did. We had a plan with Rwanda. Now, the difference is the current proposed plan is for failed asylum seekers, but the Rwanda plan, the biggest difference that I can see, well, the two biggest, there's a for and against. The against is that the Supreme Court said, well, we've designated it an unsafe country. Obviously, a lot of human rights campaigners said that's not a good idea, but on the other hand, the government was assuring people that we'll set it up properly and make sure it's safe. Those arguments went back and forth, but ultimately the Supreme Court decided that if we've designated it unsafe, they shouldn't be going there. But that aside, the criteria was very different for the Rwanda plan. Easier, in fact. There was an inadmissibility aspect to it, meaning that there was no need to process an asylum claim here if they passed through a safe third country like France. And so it was not necessary for a failed asylum claim. They could have been sent straight to Rwanda for processing, regardless of whether their claim was pending or likely to succeed or not. The proposal was that they would be served with a notice of intent for removal within 7 days of arriving in the UK and relocated to Rwanda within weeks. Now, there were some problems with that, apart from the aforementioned legal challenges in the Supreme Court and so on, but there was also limited capacity, the time and scale, and everything else. And accordingly, Keir Starmer repeatedly referred to the Rwanda scheme as a bit of a gimmick, something that never acted as a deterrent, which, to be honest, I think it did. He said that it would only apply to a small amount of people. There were legal and other ethical problems and concerns with it, which we've dealt with. And of course, it was a significant cost. I think we can probably all agree there's a cost to remove and there's a cost to stay. So what is the biggest difference then? Because this I see as a bit of a problem, and why I think it's probably going to fail. Now, I'm not shooting Keir Starmer down for coming up with some plan and trying to do something, but I do think that this is something to try to appease disillusioned voters who just may never vote for Labour, or even Labour voters who are now disillusioned themselves. But here's why I think it's a bit of a problem. This is being reported as being for failed asylum seekers who could be sent to this third country, not that any other third countries agreed to it yet. They could be sent to this third country when they have exhausted all avenues of appeal. Now, there's the problem, because as I mentioned in my interview with Rupert Lowe yesterday, I'll link it below if you missed that, the legal system is too long-winded, too expensive, takes too long, and it's just frankly not very efficient for the most part. So let's say, for example, the average asylum claim might take over a year. So that's over a year's worth of funding for each asylum seeker, or the tens of thousands of illegal migrants that arrive that then claim asylum per year. Over a year of applying for asylum. Now, given that there's already a backlog of something in the region of 100,000 asylum claims going on at the moment, each of those could take a year of processing. And then, after, let's say that they are failed, let's say they refuse that asylum claim, they then might file some kind of appeal, and that might take a couple of years in and of itself. Because let's say that they have their asylum claim refused, and then they are issued with a deportation order, they might challenge the deportation order under several human rights grounds. This is where we've got the problem with ECHR. Now, this is a double-edged sword because many people rely on ECHR for lots of different things, the freedom of expression being one of them, but even that is being curtailed, as you well know, from videos that I've done just recently, but they might well rely on several human rights grounds as to why they don't want to be removed to any third country, let alone where they originally came from, if indeed we can find that out. But those appeals might take a year or 2 or 3 years in of themselves. And with the backlog, and bearing in mind the courts and tribunal service is not just understaffed and underserviced, but there are significant backlogs of cases in all of the courts, civil, criminal, family, and indeed the immigration tribunals, these might take several years. So this return to another country, not that any other country has agreed to it yet. Albania's, first of all, said no, which is a bit odd because Keir Starmer was in Albania to announce that this was the plan, and Albania said no in a press interview, which I saw, which I thought in and of itself was a bit odd, although they said that wasn't a surprise. I think it probably was a surprise, if I'm being quite honest with you, but otherwise, why choose Albania? It seems a bit odd to me, but there we go. But even if a third country does agree and accepts to be the return hub for this program, it will only apply to those that have exhausted all avenues of appeal. So this is Keir Starmer, I think, and his government saying, we hear you, we want to do something about this, we're going to find somewhere to send them, but only after all these appeals have been exhausted. Whereas the Rwanda plan, if it did work properly, at least would have had somewhere to send them if they came to us from a third safe country like France, which I've been saying for some time now. I really don't see why we shouldn't be firm with France and say, they need to come back to you because that's where they came from. So on the one hand, we've got Keir Starmer repeatedly reminding you that the last government lost control of the borders, which we can't really argue with. But at the same time, he says he's determined to retake control of the borders. I just don't think it's going to work like this. Whilst I do support the smashing the gangs efforts further up the line, I for one think there needs to be stronger measures on the borders to actually stop things happening there and physically taking them back to France, whilst keeping them safe, of course, because I obviously don't advocate anyone getting hurt, but we could take them back to France safely. And in my view, that would be an immediate deterrent. If they've made a payment to come across here and they just get taken straight back, they've lost the money, they've lost the trip, and ultimately, I think that's the biggest deterrent. But that's just my view. I'm just one person. You're free to disagree with me. Let me know in the comments if you agree with that or not. And let me know in the comments what you think about Keir Starmer's plan. Bearing in mind that if you just hear that he's now in talks with other countries to send them to another country, bearing in mind that's after they've exhausted all avenues of appeal, which could take several years. And even then, they might well get the right to stay. And even then, that might outlast this current parliament. So all of this might actually be for nothing. So I just wanted you to have at least just my perspective on whether I think this is going to work or not. I think it's a good move in the right direction, but I don't think it's anywhere near strong enough or realistically effective. I'm not bashing for bashing's sake, I promise you. I just don't think it's effective because we've seen countless cases that take several years and get nowhere. So I wanted you to have my opinion. You can disregard that if you like, and we'll still get on. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.